coming from India, the sense of irony is very important, I think, to Indian sense of modern history, because before the British came, we had quite developed theories of enjoyment, basically theories of bodily fluids that create moods and enjoyment. And depending on how you count them, we used to think of as there being 8 or 9 such moods of enjoyment. We call them rasa, which literally means juices. And that's at the basis of Indian medical thinking, Hindu medical thinking, as well as at the basis of our systems of rhetoric. And things like the mood of peace, the mood of finding something sweet, the mood of finding something grotesque. That's how the list goes. I always thought that European colonial rule gave us the 9th or the 10th rasa, which was the rasa of irony. In other words, to look at human history, mainly to see how the shadow falls between the promise and the performance. So the shadow of Anthropocene has now fallen, or the human beings becoming a geophysical agency, has now fallen between the promise of freedom and the actual achievement to it.
Okay, so if I were to describe reality, if I were able to give you another worldview, which I'm not, because I'm claiming that there are no coherent worldviews here, okay? Neither any religious worldview nor the scientific worldview, for that matter. No worldview works. They're all false. They're all expressions of fear. You want to make things much simpler than they really are, and this is why you look for some formula covering everything. Everything is spatial temporal, okay? Things are exactly like physics say they are, okay? Or things are exactly like sociology says they are, okay? Whatever your preferred discipline or way of thinking. Or things are exactly like the Bible says, okay? So whenever you use something like that, what you're really giving voice to is fear, okay? Namely the fear of infinity. You're not looking into how things really are. And if I were to give you a world picture, okay, again, I could only give you a metaphor in order to show you how I believe things look once you give up the fantasy of the world, okay? So here's how things look once the world's gone. Think of it this way. In this very moment, all our lives intersect, and they all intersect with a TEDx event, okay? People watching this intersect currently with our lives, and all these things intersect in manifold ways. And if you really want to find out how they intersect, you have to talk to the people, you have to do particular research on how people interpret what I'm saying, etc. All these things intersect. While I'm saying this, my neurons are firing, your neurons are firing, okay? Some volcano is exploding in a galaxy far away and will never be observed, etc. All these detailed things are happening right now. Maybe a really crazy Martian creature is writing a book by the title, Why the World Really Does Exist, okay? Or another version of the Bible. They call it the Schmeibel over there, okay? So all of this is really happening, and I think what we need to do now, okay, and I think that's an important step for humanity, is we really have to give up the idea that all things are connected. Some things are connected and some things are not. We have to give up the idea that there's an overall structure which already settles things. And if we give up the idea, we also have a chance of reconsidering the option that we're really the free, autonomous human beings that we think we are. We are not determined by an overall structure, okay, behind our backs. It's neither God nor the universe, okay, it's us. And that means, in that sense, we're alone. But the way we are alone is we're alone with infinite possibilities worth exploring. And this is how I want to end this talk.
Mi matambo kumweti dovaninga ka stolo ni stolo tlamanga ho na usindala leswaku ku nga kumana ni xikopana na leswaku ni madambu ku n'wete Maria lowu vaningaka xitolo ni xitolo kembako ni madambu ku n'weti lowu vaningaka xitolo ni xitolo ntlan'wangaho na wu swindla leswaku ku nga kumana ni xikopana leswaku
While it is contingently and historically true that the climate crisis has happened when we are in a fossil fuel-based, largely capitalist structure, and therefore the climate crisis will accentuate the iniquities of capitalism, which itself will have very interesting implications for the kind of debates we have about climate change and how we propose to address the problem. Logically and intrinsically, the more defined problem of anthropogenic global warming, as distinct from the age of humans, logically and intrinsically, it is blind to the question of justice between human beings. So that, as I said, even a very just society based on fossil fuel could have actually produced a much larger crisis than we already have. We do not have a living Earth exactly, but one whose parts continually interact. More than that, organic life, once formed, becomes a fundamental determinant of the non-organic life. Bacterial work contributes to the carbon cycle. Even mineral formation is biologically mediated. Once, McDougall writes, once you have plants, photosynthesizing plants, and oxygen is in the air, minerals get this oxygenation process by which you get much larger range of minerals than the planet originally had. So humans are outscaled by the climate crisis. Coping with it intellectually, politically must mean coping with the problem of scale that exists across the very many histories in which we suddenly find ourselves. The larger we, that larger we, will not make us politically one. And it is precisely because we are not politically one that histories of intra-human injustice and welfare will remain relevant and necessary. But even as we engage in those battles, we'll probably have to think of them in the much larger context of the history of life, how Earth history connects to it, and where humans figure in it overall.
You okay? How is she?
Annoyed.
Let me begin by Jorge Semprún, a survivor of concentration camps in World War II and a Spanish writer. He reports in his memoirs how he witnessed the arrival of a truckload of Polish Jews at Buchenwald concentration camp. They were stacked into the freight train, almost 200 to a car, traveling for days without food and water in the coldest winter of the World War II. Had death, except for 15 children, kept warm by the others in the center of the bundle of bodies. When the children were emptied from the car, the Nazi guards let their dogs loose on them. Soon, only 2 fleeing children were left. And then a quote from Jorge Semprún. The little one of the 2 children began to fall behind. The SS guards were howling behind them, and then the dogs began to howl too. The smell of blood was driving them mad. And then the bigger of the 2 children slowed his pace to take the hand of the smaller. Together they covered a few more yards till the blows of the clubs felt them, and together they dropped, their faces to the ground, their hands clasped for all eternity. End of quote. What should not escape our attention is that the freeze of eternity is embodied in the hand as a partial object. While the bodies of the 2 boys perish, the clasped hands persists for all eternity, like the smile of the Cheshire Cat from Lewis Carroll. One can easily imagine how this scene should be filmed, while, at least I would have filmed it in that way, while the soundtrack renders what goes on in reality. The 2 children are clapped to death, torn apart by the dogs, and so on. The image of their hands clasped, of their freezes, immobilized for eternity, while the sound renders temporary reality, the brutal murder of the 2 boys, the image renders the eternal real. It is the pure surface of such fixed images, not any deeper meaning, which allows for redemptive moments in the bleak story of the Holocaust. The frozen image which insists over reality, rendered by sounds, reality, stands for a positive ethical utopia of eternity. So that's my first point. This image is real and at the same time virtual. And here I'm an unashamed Platonist. I think that Plato just has to be corrected the way Lacan suggests. A Platonic idea is not some deeper substantial reality. It's just, when an unexpected, miraculous ethical act occurs. Like here, the older boy gathering the courage at the moment practically of dying, of stepping back, holding the other guy's hand. This frozen image, this is eternity. This is the real. In a way, more real than the vulgar reality. It is real as virtual.